September 2nd, 2022, the most controversial title of the year is here, The Last of Us Part 1, or commonly known as The Last of Us Remake, or the Remaster? I decided to give it a go, as I mentioned I would in my previous video, and to be honest, I have been looking forward to playing it, so much so I booked the day off work to give it my full attention, as I knew I would be making a video on it at some point. I wanted to make this video because I want to give my thoughts on the remake and how my experience was, because right now as I'm writing this, a week after launch, my feelings are mixed, surprisingly. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, The Last of Us, at least for me, is a masterpiece, the best game I have and ever will probably play. So much so, I didn't realise I could go into the stats of the game and see how many times I've played it. I think I've gone on record and stated I've played it 11 times. It's fair to say my assumption was slightly out. I have completed The Last of Us 21 times, and now 22 if I include the remake, so it's safe to say I do know the game. I feel I'm somewhat an experienced player. I know the gameplay, level design and the narrative like the back of my hand, so I feel I can give a valid opinion towards the remake. I know there's people who have probably played the game many more times than me, and for a lot longer too, like the speedrunners for example, and they're the veterans and I take my hat off to them. So let's get down to it. Straight away, the visuals are breathtaking, there's no doubt about it. It's such a vast improvement over the original. But don't get me wrong, the original still holds up very well, at least in the remastered form. Before this remake came out, I really didn't think it needed updating, but after seeing that opening cutscene, I realised it just had to be done. Just in the facial animations alone, they're fantastic. You can really see what the characters are feeling and expressing. The animation developers at Naughty Dog did a fine job in bringing the original performances to life, as back when the original game was developed, the facial animations had to be hand keyed, and some of the detail was missed, as is what they had to work with at the time. The technology was somewhat limited. Now I'm assuming they've used some sort of software to rescan the performances. I don't really know as I'm not a developer, but whatever they've done has improved it no end. Now, the lighting engine was very hit or miss for me. I actually think I prefer the lighting and colour palette from the original, because this game was developed with Part 2's engine. The remake feels more dark, as Part 2 was a dark game in regards to its narrative direction, so the world and game design had to follow suit. Now before you say, I know The Last of Us is a dark game, there's no question about that. You only need to play the first 10 minutes to find that out, but throughout the narrative there is an abundance of light if you look for it, and the original game's lighting and colour palette reflects that. But for me with the remake, it felt too dark. In certain areas the colours were less saturated. Inside buildings, even though there was natural light flooding in, it still felt dark. It seemed to have a gloomy atmosphere, with volumetric fog being added in some backdrops which didn't really help, and in some dark areas in the original there is almost too much light in the remake and it ruins the atmosphere. I guess I can't really win. I found myself using the torch way more in this version, which frustrated me because, like I say, certain buildings had plenty of light coming through, but the shadows were far too strong. Maybe it's because I played the game with HDR enabled, which can lead to strong shadows sometimes. Now I did try recalibrating the HDR and I messed with the in-game settings too, but I couldn't really improve it, and if I turn the contrast all the way down, it more or less makes having HDR on pointless. Some environments were spot on, like in the spring chapter, but others, such as Pittsburgh, were unbearable. You have to experience it in both versions to truly notice it. Whatever Naughty Dog did with the lighting and shadows just didn't sit right with me. It felt too gloomy, like Part 2, and like I say, it works with that title, as it matches that narrative's darker overall theme. The gameplay. Oh, the gameplay. It wasn't quite what I was expecting. And no, I don't mean the lack of prone or dodge either. For starters, I've never had a problem with the controls in The Last of Us. I thought they were very intuitive for the time. The movements were fine, but the shooting mechanics were very hit or miss. Thankfully, the remake addresses the gunplay by using the shooting mechanics from Part 2, and it is much appreciated. The guns are much more accurate, even with weapon sway. I must say though, the implemented haptics and adaptive triggers didn't really do anything for me. I think the features were overhyped by Naughty Dog. I think the effects on the triggers were not strong enough, even though my settings were set to the max tension. Or maybe it's muscle memory, as I've played a few titles with these features now, and I've gotten used to the tension. As for the haptics, well, all they seem to do is add some vibration to the cutscenes. The problem is, I tend to put my controller down during cutscenes, so it's kind of wasted. What I also didn't get on with was the character movement and the camera movement. For starters, The Last of Us relies heavily on stealth, and the mechanics are much improved in this version. If you get spotted, unfortunately it is down to your poor choices, rather than the poor or limited programming of the original. What I found when I was in stealth, especially in cover, sometimes the camera would lock when moving it slightly, and it would only free up again until I moved the character. I'm guessing this is a tactic to reduce clipping with objects in the environment. It made controlling Joel very clunky when in stealth. When out of stealth, moving and running is fine, it's just as the original was. One mechanic that was added, in which annoys me, is the little hesitation a character does before jumping down from a ledge. They take a little wobble, then the character drops, and to me it just looks so silly. I couldn't stand it in Part 2, and I can't stand it here. If the camera is pointing down, that means the character is looking down. So they shouldn't have to do this silly little hesitation / wobble animation. And if it looked really high, they wouldn't jump. Simple. I know it's meant to be realistic, because the characters sometimes have to drop from heights that might be out of their comfort zone, but it just looks so stupid. Someone like Joel doesn't have the time to think about those sort of things when he is trying to escape from enemies in the world. He didn't do a silly little wobble when jumping off that bridge now, did he? There was another annoying little bug I encountered while traversing the world. Every so often the camera would randomly point straight to the ground, for no reason. I think I also had this problem in Part 2. Maybe it's something to do with the options I have set. Maybe it's an auto recenter option that bugs out. I have no idea, but it happened way too often for my liking, so I have to include it. Again, no such thing happened in the original. The melee combat is what you would expect. Exceptionally violent, but at the same time, so much fun. But like the original, Naughty Dog have done a great job at making you feel each stroke of the golf club, wooden plank. It's all very fluid, much more than what the original could achieve, even though the animations are very similar. But to me, nothing new had to be added, as it worked extremely well in the first place. The story and narrative is exactly the same, thankfully. There has been some character model and camera placement changes here and there, but for the most part it is 99.9% the same. The only disappointing thing I found in my playthrough in relation to the story was the ability to trigger certain optional dialogue within the gameplay. I know it doesn't really matter, but if you want to explore the character's development or their relationships, or to simply obtain the relevant trophies, this can be a problem. For some reason, no matter what I tried, dialogue wouldn't appear where they normally should. Maybe the triggers have been moved in this remake, or cut altogether. The worst offender was in the hotel lobby. No matter what I did, I could not get Ellie to say this.
Oh, I'll be checking in for one night, and I would like your finest suite, please.
The hell are you doing?
Why, yes, you can take my luggage upstairs.
You are a weird kid.
I literally tried what I could, and I mirrored what I normally do in the original, but like I say, the triggers may have been moved. Not long after this, I put the ladder down and climbed up. Somewhere after climbing it in the original, this normally triggers Ellie to bring out the joke book for the second time.
I tried to catch some fog earlier. I missed. Do you know what's not right?
Left?
Yeah. That's awesome. What does a pirate say while eating sushi?
I don't know what.
Ahoy! Pass me some soy. I don't get it. People are making apocalypse jokes like there's no tomorrow. Too soon. That's it. That's all I got.
If you are chasing the trophy, this is handy. For me, I just love Joel and Ellie's interactions, but again, no matter what I did, I could not get the dialogue to trigger. In other areas, such as Billstown, when they're walking down what would be the high street, there is normally some dialogue where Ellie says about the street being quaint, in which Joel replies of it feeling empty. This is quite a rare trigger, and I think it only triggers if you're in the area for quite some time. Again, I tried and tried, but nothing. However, what did work was a restart encounter / checkpoint, and that seemed to fix it. But why would I want to do that for every time I want to hear a piece of dialogue? And I did try it in the hotel lobby, and I didn't have any luck. So it doesn't work all of the time, and some restart encounters / checkpoints might spawn you to a point further back into the scene or chapter, which isn't really ideal. I really hope Naughty Dog sort this out, as let's be honest, the dialogue and character developments are key to this game's groundedness and probably its success in the medium in the first place. It's what makes these characters come to life.
I guess this is where the assholes sleep. I mean, slept.
What also makes them come to life is their movements within this dialogue. Sometimes in the original, when Joel and Ellie would converse, you could see their heads moving or their arms moving to empathise they really are having a conversation. Now these animations are still somewhat present in the remake, but they are very watered down. I do have one example.
What happened here? Your fellow hunters do this?
Cute. And no, my money's on the military.
Why would they mow down all these people?
You can't let everyone in.
So they killed them?
And dead people don't get infected. You sacrifice the few to save the many.
It's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
What happened here? Your fellow hunters do this?
Cute. And no, my money's on the military.
Why would they mow down all these people?
You can't let everyone in.
So they killed them?
And dead people don't get infected. You sacrifice the few to save the many.
It's kind of shitty.
Yeah.
Now maybe this was watered down because of the new engine. They don't have to really empathise that Joel and Ellie are communicating, but I personally like the movements that go with it. It feels more natural, and to me, body language is important.
Hey, look! Gnomes.
Yeah, those are gnomes.
Man, I had an art book filled with these. I always thought they were super cute. Not fairies, though. They creep me out.
All right, Ben.
Hey, look! Gnomes.
Yeah, those are gnomes.
Man, I had an art book filled with these. I always thought they were super cute. Not fairies, though. They creep me out.
All right, Ben.
What was also cut from the game, or missed out, are sounds that Joel makes when starting to crouch and when carrying items such as ladders and planks.
I think you should probably hang on to your bullets.
Now, I know for the average Last of Us player, this won't really matter, or some of you may not have even noticed it at all, but with this being in the original, it shows that Joel really is human. You can sense that this world is hard on the human body. Crouch walking is hard, and Joel shows this by making a grunt when he crouches. Trust me, you try crouch walking, it's hard. You sense that the ladder or plank he is carrying is heavy, again, by the grunts. Is also in line with his age. Joel isn't exactly old, being in his 50s in the events of the main narrative. But with these sounds being added in, it shows that traversing the world, crouching, lifting, jumping, is putting a strain on his body. Again, I must empathise on this. It provides more layers to his character, to make you believe that this isn't just a character, but a human. When you compare to the remake, there is nothing. Only the out-of-breath sounds from running, jumping, and maybe the initial lift of the plank or ladder, and sounds from getting injured, obviously. There are no sounds from crouching or carrying items, in which was a major immersion breaker for me. Joel felt, well, like an object. I no longer felt the weight of that plank putting pressure on his joints. He no longer felt human. He no longer felt like a survivor, in which is important for this franchise. He just came across as a tank that just lifts items with ease. Don't get me wrong, Joel is a tough and strong character, but again, you do feel the strain on his body when he is just simply lifting items, and because of those few pieces of audio being redundant, it completely broke the immersion for me. I know it all sounds so pivotal, but trust me, when you notice it, you will understand. Now, moving on. I don't think I would consider those aforementioned lack of dialogue triggers glitches, more of a bug. When it came to major game-breaking glitches, I'll be honest, I didn't come across any. I did encounter some immersion-breaking glitches, such as what appeared to look like rocks floating in the air in a scene in the spring chapter. I also noticed some of the flats in Pittsburgh. The carpets were way too clean for not being hoovered for over 20 years. A bit nitpicky, I know. And I did have some small flickering textures in some chapters, and some odd animations in Billstown, in which, funny enough, was a problem in the original too. Other than that, it was a fairly smooth experience. So in conclusion, it's a bit of a mixed bag for me. I still think this is the definitive way to play for the visuals and gameplay alone, but I think Naughty Dog need to look back and work on the dialogue triggers and what actually makes these characters they created human, in which is more than just realistic facial expressions. We need more body language, audio that was cut to be added back in, and to be able to hear their conversations when I want to, and then I might be able to call it a masterpiece. Or perhaps I just need another playthrough, and the issues I noticed might not even be present in the second run. But after 10 hours spent in my first playthrough, my experience felt like it needed a dear amount of added polish. It's not unfinished by any means, it just needs some extra care taken. Perhaps they might even iron it all out in future patches or even the PC version. And yes, don't worry, I will be getting that too, even if it is another £70. I didn't really want to talk about the price of this game, but I suppose I should at least give it my thoughts now I've played it, and I can't really give a definitive answer. It's purely down to if £70 is worth it to you. If it isn't, then that's okay. No one is forcing you to buy this game in its early days of launch, and if £70 is completely fine by you, then go for it. No matter what you decide, you will definitely have a great time with The Last of Us Remake. It plays different, it looks different, and it sounds different. but it is still the story we come back for, time and time again. The story of Joel and Ellie.